Hey, how's it going? Welcome back. As per usual, I got a small stack of records here I picked up over the last few weeks to show. But first, I'm going to give a shout out and a thank you to Marty Worm for having me on the Heavy Metallurgy live stream this past Friday. I was on there discussing crossover with him and Eric from High Defamation TV. So thanks to both those guys for making it a goddamn good time. And thanks to everybody that watched and commented along the way. And to those that subscribed to me since the live stream. That's mighty nice of you. I hope I don't disappoint. And if I do, I hope that somehow, in some way, your life will go back to normal. But enough of that. Let's talk records. I got some bangers today. I'm gonna come out of the gate swinging with an early 80s US hardcore classic. Necros, Conquest for Death. 1983, Touch and Go Records. Touch and Go Records, of course, started by Tesco V from the Meatmen until he passed the torch to Corey Rusk of the Necros. A fairly well-known band from Ohio. Two tracks on this, both are awesome. Conquest for Death is like a really snotty, kind of careening, punk masterpiece. It just drips disgust. It's kind of like the soundtrack to being way too drunk and like playing pinball down a hallway trying to find the washroom before you throw up on yourself. That's what Conquest for Death sounds like. The B side is Take 'Em Up, which is my favorite Necros track of all of them. Rapid fire, pissed off, snotty, early 80s hardcore, US hardcore punk. It's a pretty heavy tirade against handicap parking spots, which by today's standards, I guess would be considered a little insensitive, but I can tell you, in 1983, the Necros gave not 1 ounce of fuck about being insensitive. So you just gotta suck it up. Yeah, great tracks, great record, great band, great cover. Look at that thing. Yeah, Necros. Next up, I got one I pulled out of the bins at Rotate This. Rotate This is a record store in Toronto. It was cheap. I hadn't seen it before. I had to pick it up. Plasmatics, 1978. It's the Butcher Baby 7-inch. It's on Vice Squad Records. Plasmatics, of course, from New York. I've discussed them quite a bit on the channel. I said it before, but when I was a kid, I fucking hated this band because they kind of embodied that cartoony punk aesthetic that the mainstream media kind of took hold of, and it just, they always represented punks as basically cartoon characters, and I felt that the Plasmatics kind of spearheaded that in a way. And they did, not so much on this, because this is an early one. Like I said, it's from 1978. But as they went on, they got a little more cartoony. But whatever. In the last couple of decades, I've made peace with them, and I like them. So, yeah, this like Wendy at this point hadn't even developed the super gravelly vocals that she ended up possessing, later in her musical career. She did still sound like Bullwinkle though. But yeah, this is really good. I mean, you got Butcher Baby, which is a really well done studio version of it. And the other tracks on it are Fast Food Service and Concrete Shoes. They're both live, but they're both well recorded live songs, so it's not a waste of time to listen to them. But yeah, I'd never actually seen this one. It was cheap, so I grabbed it. Next is another one that I saw in the bins that Rotate This. This was a blind buy. I looked at it, immediately thought that it was a power pop single. It's a band called The Senders. It's from 1978. It's on SRI Records. It's The Living End, backed with No More Foolin'. Now, like I said, I thought this was a power pop record. It looks like one. 1978, the years check out, the aesthetic checks out. In reality, it's really just a rock and roll record. The A side, The Living End, it's a pretty uninteresting, kind of a bluesy bar rock song. Didn't hold my attention for more than about 2 seconds. The B side, though, No More Foolin', that's the good stuff. It's a lot more high energy. It's more up tempo. I mean, there's a little bit of a power pop component to it, but moreover, it's just a kind of like a slightly rockabilly leaning rock and roll. It's a really good track. So, 50% of the record is good to me. Now we got a classic of early Toronto punk. I've never owned this record before, and I got this one. It's in perfect shape. Looks like it's never been played. It's the Mods. Step Out Tonight. It's backed with You Use Me. Obviously, the band's called the Mods. You take a look at those dudes, you're going to think highly influenced by the Jam, and you would be correct. The thing that kind of makes these guys stand out is the vocals. He's got a really deep voice, and he sounds like he's really congested. So when they do the harmonizing, it kind of gives it almost a unique take on that kind of thing. So yeah, super good record. Glad to own it. 1978 Mods Records. And another kind of heavy hitter from the early Toronto punk scene, also from 1978 on Explosion Records. It's The Ugly, Stranded in the Laneway of Love, backed with To Have Some Fun. Now, everything I've ever read about The Ugly points to the fact that they were a pretty rough bunch. They were kind of, one of the predominant kind of criminal elements in early Toronto, punk culture. But this record, it doesn't, like, listening to the songs on this record, it doesn't really indicate that. Like, by most accounts, the Toronto, punk in Toronto kind of kicked it right off after the Ramones played there the first time, which I'm sure is, pretty much similar with a lot of places. But you can hear like a little bit of Ramones in this, but I hear a lot more almost of a, like a bubblegum influence to it. And the songs aren't bad, but it's just from everything I've read about how like rough and crazy these dudes were, their music on this record just doesn't really indicate that. Although I have seen live footage, like they're on the Last Pogo, and the live footage is way more wild and like harder. So I'm under the impression that like a lot of bands, these guys were a better live band. But I got no regrets of getting this record because it's cool, and it's kind of a cool historical artifact, I guess, as it were. But yeah, the singer of this band actually was the boyfriend of this girl named Ruby T, who played in a power pop band called True Confessions at one point. But she was kind of like the photographic cornerstone of early Toronto punk, maybe. She was kind of like Toronto's answer to that Catwoman that was always photographed, like kind of in association with the Sex Pistols and whatnot. Yeah, she was like Toronto's answer to that. She eventually just disappeared off the face of the earth, so there's all these theories about what happened to her and whatnot. And Mike Nightmare, like her boyfriend, the singer of this band, he ended up dying too. And for, I've heard a million, stories about how he met his end and whatnot. On the Last Pogo Jumps Again, the sequel DVD to the Last Pogo, there's a woman on there that gives the story that, that is generally accepted. And I'll link that in the description. And speaking of the Last Pogo, that thing right there, it's on YouTube, so I'll put a description to that, or I'll put a link to that in the description below as well, because it's only half hour long, and it's worth your time to watch it if you're interested in early Toronto punk. You get like the Mods, the Ugly, you got the Vile Tones, Cardboard Brains, the Scenics, the Secrets, Teenage Head, all that stuff. So it's definitely worth a watch. All right, another one from Ontario, not from Toronto though. Band called The Innocent. This is called Got It in the Bag. It's on Silent W Productions, which was the same label that released the Crash 80s 7-inch, which was a band local to my town, back in these days. Now, it's a power pop record, but it's really heavily punk leaning power pop. It actually kind of reminds me of if you mix Teenage Head with the Romantics. And it's awesome. It's way better than I expected it to be. And the Teenage Head kind of connection, it's there because They're from Burlington, Ontario, which is directly east of Hamilton, Ontario, which is where Teenage Head came from. So it makes a lot of sense that Teenage Head would influence their sound, but I didn't expect this to be as punk leaning as it is. It's really, really good. Never seen a copy of this before. I'd only ever heard one song by this band off a compilation at some point. So I was really, really happy to have it. So The Innocent from 1980, I think. Yeah, 1980. All right, now we're going down to Detroit to a relatively well-known label, that being Tremor Records. It's a band called The 27. Record's called Don't Go to Extremes. You got Frances Farmer on the cover. She was an actress that struggled pretty hard with mental illness for pretty much her entire life. Sad story, really. But yeah, the 27 is members of a band called the Ramrods. The vocals are, well, I mean, they're from Detroit, so you would expect it, but very heavily leaning in the Iggy Pop direction in the vocal department. But, the A side, it's a weird, kind of almost like claustrophobic, depressing sounding track. Almost kind of reminds me of Bauhaus in a way. It's got kind of a goth element to it. The B side, both the songs on the B side, Catastrophe and Lifeblood, they're both, more standard, late 70s punk tracks. Catastrophe is actually my personal favorite of the bunch. But yeah, it's a good record. And we got another one, Tremor Records. That 27 was from 1979. This one's from 1980. It's a band called Service. Time Release, backed with Don't Be Sad. Time Release is one of my favorite power pop songs of all time. Definitely in a top 5. It's got like a catchy, repetitive riff, really well done harmonies, speeds up in the chorus. It's just really good. It's a really well done song. The B-side, also really good, but it's just more of a standard power pop track. Like, I mean, it's good, but it's not like, crazy good. But Time Release is crazy good. This band was from like Royal Oak, Michigan. So I'm sure Dead Wax 66 is probably familiar with this. And the 27. And we'll go down to Chicago, 1980, or actually 1979. A band I'd never heard of. I just picked it up to pad out the postage on a Discogs order, and it turns out it's awesome. It's a band called Immune System. Ambivalence and Spark Plugs. Backed with Submerged. New wave, power pop leaning. The A side, Ambivalence and Spark Plugs, really cool. It's got an interesting kind of like a nonsense chorus. It's very, very good. The B side's way more experimental, slower, strange. It's cool. It's just not as cool as the A side. But I'd never heard of this band before. Took a chance on it, and I'm glad I did. Apparently, after this record came out, the bass player and guitar player left. The bass player was replaced by Al Jorgensen, who later obviously went on to form Ministry. But yeah, this is a lot different than that, that's for sure. But yeah, if you like, power poppy new wave, then Immune System, it just might be your bag. All right, and we're going to end it with a record that I've seen a few people show. I know Ryan Kidd showed it. I've seen it shown elsewhere. I can't remember if it was Dr. October or maybe Stevie showed it, but it's a band from Scotland. It's the Valves. This is Robot Love and For Adolphs Only. It's good. It's good late 70s, punk rock from Edinburgh, Scotland. For Adolphs Only is my personal favorite. It's like a stomper track. It's just super obnoxious and really good. Robot Love, it's all right. There's backing vocals in it that I find kind of irritating, but it's an all right song. But For Adolphs Only is the winner here, at least in my opinion. So it's on the hell's the label? It's on Zoom Records. It's from 1977, so going way back. But yeah, the Valves, fairly well-known record. It's been comped a bunch. So yeah, that's all I got, and I'll be back at some point. Next one I do will probably be more new bands. I picked up some new stuff, so I'll show you some more current bands that you probably don't know. Whatever. Have a good day. Have a good long weekend. It's Labor Day today. See ya.